Most women spend their lives polishing a persona, a mask of the acceptable, the pleasing, the expected. Yet deep within, a more profound, potent energy stirs, waiting for its invitation to the surface. This is not about learning a new set of rules. It is about an unlearning, a sacred homecoming to the archetypal truths that already reside in your bones. It is the journey from the collective echo to the sovereign voice, a process Carl Jung called individuation. The irresistible mature woman is not a product of societal conditioning, but a masterful architect of her own authentic being, one who has dared to descend into the depths of her own shadow and return, integrated and whole. This is the path of psychological depth, where true magnetic allure is forged not in the flickering light of external validation, but in the steady, eternal flame of self-possession. To become irresistible, one must first cease chasing the fleeting reflections in the eyes of others. The world will constantly present you with a menu of who you should be: the flawless mother, the relentless career woman, the eternally youthful lover. These are projections of the collective anima, and to blindly embody them is to fragment your soul. The mature woman resists this fragmentation. She turns her gaze inward, not with narcissism, but with the fierce curiosity of an archaeologist of the self. She understands that the first and most vital habit is the cultivation of a rich and unassailable inner world. This is a sanctuary built on stoic principle, a fortress of the mind where, as Marcus Aurelius wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Here, in the quiet communion with herself, she does not seek to find herself, but to create herself moment by conscious moment. She engages in a constant dialogue with her own psyche, acknowledging the rejected parts, the jealous child, the furious teenager, the vulnerable maiden, not as enemies to be exiled, but as aspects of her wholeness, waiting to be embraced and understood. This is the foundational work that makes all other magnetism possible. This inner sanctuary becomes the wellspring from which her second habit flows, the profound and unshakable ownership of her own emotional reality. She has moved beyond the juvenile fantasy that others are responsible for her emotional weather. She no longer projects her inner storms onto unsuspecting partners, demanding they calm a sea they did not stir. This is where stoic wisdom merges with modern psychology. She has learned, as Epictetus taught, that it's not events that disturb people, but their judgments about them. A comment from a lover, a setback at work, a perceived slight. These are not the triggers themselves. The trigger is the unconscious story she tells herself about the event, a story often written by old wounds and unhealed trauma. The mature woman pauses in that sacred space between stimulus and response. In that pause, she does the work of discernment. She asks, "Is this my truth, or is this the ghost of an old hurt masquerading as my truth?" She holds her emotions not as absolute commanders, but as valuable messengers bearing intelligence from the shadowy depths of her unconscious. This emotional sovereignty is intensely alluring, for it communicates a terrifying and beautiful freedom. I am complete with or without you. My love is an offering, not a desperate need. This very sovereignty births her third habit, the dissolution of the need to be perceived as good or nice by everyone. She has made peace with her own shadow, and in doing so has liberated herself from the exhausting tyranny of the collective approval. The young girl was taught to be palatable, to soften her edges, to make her presence a comfortable one. The mature woman knows that to be wholly alive is to be at times wholly uncomfortable. She understands that her no is as sacred as her yes, that her boundaries are not walls of isolation, but the dignified gates to her soul. She will not contort herself to fit the projections of the masculine or the expectations of the feminine collective. This is not about being disagreeable. It is about being real. It is the ultimate expression of self-respect. and it commands a respect from others that mere agreeableness could never secure. A man, particularly one who is himself on the path of individuation, is not drawn to a blank canvas upon which he can project his own fantasies. He is drawn to a masterpiece already rich with color and texture and story. A woman who is definitively, unapologetically herself, even when that self is complex, challenging, and refuses to be neatly categorized. This unapologetic self-definition is the bedrock upon which she builds her fourth habit, the art of deep, transformative listening. This is not the passive, polite listening of societal convention, but an active, penetrating attention that sees beyond the words into the architecture of the soul speaking them. She listens not to formulate her reply, but to understand the hidden landscape of the other. She hears the unspoken fears, the silent yearnings, the shadow figures that dance in the background of every confession. In a world starved for true witness, her presence becomes a sanctuary for the souls of others. When a man speaks to her, he does not feel he is talking to a persona, to a mask of femininity waiting for its turn to perform. He feels he is speaking to the deep feminine principle itself, the anima that receives, contains, and understands. She listens with the same compassion she has learned to offer her own inner characters, and in doing so, she midwifes his own unconscious material to the surface. This is a terrifying and irresistible gift, for it makes a man feel truly seen, not for his achievements or his mask, but for the raw, unvarnished truth of his being. It is an act of profound courage to hold such space, for it requires her to be fully present in her own body, anchored in her own worth, without the need to rescue, fix, or absorb the other's pain. This quality of attention is a direct reflection of the relationship she has cultivated with the unseen world. Her dreams, her intuitions, her synchronicities. She trusts the whispers of her body and the intelligence of her gut, for she knows this is the language of the self, a communication from the central archetypal core of her being that transcends the rational chatter of the ego. She moves through the world not with a map drawn by external authorities, but with an inner compass calibrated by her own lived experience and deep reflection. This intuitive trust allows her to navigate complexity with a grace that seems almost supernatural. She can sense the hidden currents in a relationship, the unspoken tensions in a room, the truth that lies beneath the polished surface of a story. This is not magic. It is the reward for having done the hard, often painful work of integrating her own unconscious material. By making the darkness conscious, she has gained access to a wider spectrum of perception. A man may not understand this quality intellectually, but he will feel it in his very bones. He will feel that she is in contact with a deeper, more ancient order of knowing. And this connection to the numinous is a siren call to the masculine spirit, which so often feels adrift in a sterile, hyper-rational world. This intuitive connection grants her a fifth and profoundly potent habit, the ability to hold paradox without seeking premature resolution. The immature psyche, fearful and brittle, demands certainty. It craves labels. Are you my destiny or my lesson? Is this relationship a success or a failure? Is this emotion good or bad? The mature woman, having sat at the feet of her own contradictions, has developed a stamina for the unknown. She can hold the tension of opposites within her own heart. Fierce independence and deep longing, unwavering strength and vulnerable softness, righteous anger and boundless compassion. She does not collapse into one pole at the expense of the other. This inner capacity is then mirrored in her relationships. She can behold a man in his totality, seeing both the noble king and the wounded boy, the conscious provider and the unconscious predator, without needing to reject one to accept the other. She sees his potential not as a project to be completed, but as a seed to be honored. This creates an unparalleled space for a man to grow. He feels that he can be fully human in her presence, flawed, complex, and still in progress, without being judged as inadequate. He is not required to remain on a pedestal, nor is he condemned to the shadows of her disappointment. This is the alchemical container where true transformation occurs, where his own anima is invited to integrate, where he is inspired to become more whole, not out of fear of losing her, but out of a desire to meet the wholeness he perceives in her. This sacred holding of tension is the engine of her creative power, a power that extends far beyond the biological. Her sixth habit is the conscious channeling of this life force into a purpose that is uniquely her own. She is no longer a supporting character in someone else's narrative, waiting for a prince or a promotion to give her life meaning. She has become the author and the central actor of her own epic. This purpose is her animus, the inner masculine, not as a domineering critic, but as a focused, disciplined, and generative force. He builds structures for her soul's expression, whether that is a business, a garden, a community, or a work of art. This focused creative energy is intensely magnetic. A man of substance is not looking for a dependent to drain his resources, but for a creative partner, a queen who is already building her own kingdom. He is drawn to the vitality that radiates from a woman who is fully engaged with her own destiny. There is a quiet, busy hum to her life that is far more compelling than any desperate plea for attention. She is not a stagnant pond, but a flowing river, and a man of depth desires to swim in her currents to join his purpose with hers, creating a confluence that is greater than the sum of its parts. This shared journey of creation, of building something meaningful in the world, becomes the ultimate aphrodisiac, far surpassing the fleeting sparks of superficial romance. This creative fire, burning with purpose, inevitably refines her final and most transcendent quality, a radical detachment from outcome. This is not apathy, but the serene wisdom of the stoic sage who tends to her garden with impeccable care, yet does not rage against the weather she cannot control. She has internalized the wisdom of Seneca, who wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." She invests herself fully in her work, her relationships, her growth. She pours her entire soul into the process, but she holds the specific results with an open hand. She understands that attachment is the root of suffering, the frantic energy of the ego that clings to a particular future and in doing so, murders the sacred potential of the present moment. In love, this is her ultimate power. She does not love to secure a guarantee of reciprocation. She loves because love is the authentic expression of her expansive nature. She offers her presence, her depth, her body, not as a transaction to bind a man to her, but as a gift given from a place of overflowing abundance. This freedom from a predetermined script is what makes her presence so intoxicatingly calm and yet so electrifyingly alive. A man feels this detachment not as coldness, but as the purest form of respect. He is not being manipulated, managed, or molded to fit the contours of her anxiety. He is being met as a free agent, and in that space of mutual freedom, the only love that is truly real can blossom. There are no invisible contracts, no scorekeeping, no silent resentments festering in the dark. She is capable of enjoying a man completely for who he is in this moment, not for the phantom of who he might become tomorrow. This creates a profound and almost unbearable intimacy, for it is stripped of all performance. She is not waiting for him to complete her, and so he is liberated from the burden of trying. This allows him to relax into his own being, to let down his own guards, and to offer his love not out of obligation or fear, but as a genuine sovereign choice. The relationship becomes a shared exploration, a dynamic dance between two whole universes, rather than a desperate pact between two halves seeking to become one. The energy that was once spent on controlling, worrying, and fearing is now available for creation, joy, and deep, soul-level connection. This detachment is the final, masterful integration of her journey, the point where the archetypal queen within her takes her rightful throne, not over a kingdom of subjects, but over the sovereign territory of her own soul. She has moved beyond the need for the external world to conform to her will in order to feel peace. This is the essence of the stoic amor fati, the love of one's fate. She meets life, with all its brutal beauty and painful contractions, not as an adversary to be conquered, but as the very raw material of her individuation. A betrayal does not shatter her. It becomes a lesson in discernment. A loss does not annihilate her. It carves out new depths of compassion within her. A success does not inflate her. It is simply a moment to honor the journey. She walks through the world with a quiet, unassailable center, a stillness that exists behind the eyes, a knowing that she contains within herself all the resources needed to meet whatever arises. This is not a rigidity born of fear, but a profound flexibility born of unshakable self-trust. She can bend in the storm without breaking, because her roots have been driven deep into the bedrock of her own accepted shadow and celebrated light. This is the woman who has ceased asking the world, "Do you want me?" and has begun declaring from the very core of her being, "I am here." This shift in fundamental orientation is the source of her most irresistible magnetism. It is a frequency that resonates with those who are also on the path of wholeness, and it repels those who seek fragmented, transactional connections. She no longer casts herself as the heroine in a man's story, there to heal his wounds or complete his quest. She is the author of her own myth, and she invites him to be a guest, a co-creator, in a narrative that is already rich and compelling. She understands that the deepest attraction is not to a body or a list of accomplishments, but to a state of being, a state of integrated consciousness. When a man encounters this quality in her, he is not merely attracted to her. He is attracted to the potential within himself that she mirrors back to him. He sees in her calm gaze the reflection of his own possible wholeness, his own capacity for depth, his own latent king. She becomes a living invitation to step out of the smallness of his ego and into the grandeur of his own soul. This is an allure that time cannot wither, for it is not based on the fleeting, but on the eternal. And so this journey of becoming does not culminate in a final static state of arrival, but in a continuous flowing dance with life itself. The mature, irresistible woman is not a finished sculpture in a museum, admired from a distance. She is a living, breathing ecosystem, a forest that experiences seasons of explosive growth, periods of necessary decay, and the silent, potent magic of hibernation. She grants herself the permission to change, to outgrow former versions of herself, to shed relationships and identities that no longer serve her expansion. This fluidity is her strength, for it proves her allegiance is not to a past self-image, but to the ever-unfolding truth of her present being. She understands that the goal was never to become irresistible as an object, but to become so fully, passionately alive as a subject that her very presence becomes a testament to the beauty and power of conscious existence. This aliveness is what truly captivates, for it whispers of mysteries yet to be discovered, depths yet to be plumbed. In the end, these 6 habits are not a checklist, but a symphony. The inner sanctuary, emotional sovereignty, shadow integration, deep listening, the holding of paradox and creative purpose. They are not separate notes, but interwoven harmonies that create a unique and unforgettable frequency. This is the sound of a soul that has come home to itself. It is a sound that silences the noise of the superficial and speaks directly to the heart of what is real. It is an invitation, a challenge and a blessing all at once. The woman who has walked this path carries with her an aura of emotional freedom, a detachment from the desperate need for external validation. That is the hallmark of true inner peace. She has faced her own darkness and found it to be a source of her greatest power. She has reclaimed her projections and in doing so has reclaimed her life. She is a mirror, a sanctuary, and a force of nature. She is not seeking a completion but offering a collaboration. She is the embodiment of a sacred paradox, deeply rooted and wildly free, fiercely independent and profoundly connected, fully human and touched by the divine.